The Lewis County General Service Committee is called to order. The clerk of the board will proceed with a roll call.
Legislator Leviker,
Here.
Legislator Osborne,
Here.
Legislator Nortz,
Here.
Legislator Nellenbach,
Here.
Legislator Hanno,
Here.
Legislator Dahlhoff,
Here. I move to approve the committee minutes from April 28th, 2026. Can I have a second? Mike? It's been moved and second that the committee minutes from April 28th, 2026 have been approved. Is there any discussion? All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, no. Motion is adopted. We have one presentation for today. The first presentation is the Lewis County EMS study by Paul Bishop, CGR.
There you go. Okay, thank you. Good afternoon. Thank you for inviting me to be here today to talk about what we've been doing for the last several months related to emergency medical services in Lewis County. Whenever you can go to the next slide. So I should. All right. There we go. Okay. So with me today, sitting in the gallery, is my colleague who's a part of this project, Jim Casson. He was part of our team, was actually helped with all of the site visits early on. I'm Paul Bishop. I'm the principal, and I was responsible for our study. So overview of what we're going to cover today. I've been asked to do this in about 15 minutes. So if I'm talking a little fast, that's why, but there'll be time for your questions as we go. So we're going to give a little bit of a background of what we did. We'll give a summary of our findings. It's very high level. It ended up being about a 100-page report. So a lot of that's some detailed data. If you're interested in that, we're doing a second half of the presentation in more detail for the stakeholders tonight at 6. So we'll get into the recommendations, and then we have available our detailed findings. If I need to advance to those, if there's some particular questions, we'll get to them. But really, this is for give the high level overview of where we're going. So the background, how we started, how we got here. The project started in September. We interviewed all of the 7 in-county agencies, conducted tours of all the facilities. We also interviewed the 4 out-of-county agencies that provide service on a regular basis into Lewis County. We spoke with a wide variety of folks at the county, also something called the Fort Drum Regional Health Planning Organization. They are what's known as the New York State EMS Regional Council Program Agency, but they handle a lot of data and do some programming related to EMS. We collected and analyzed a lot of call data with some great help from the 911 center in producing that. And then we delivered an interim baseline report. I was up here in February, talked to a group of stakeholders, presented our initial findings. And what that was to establish what we found. And then we moved into what the options were and the recommendations. And so that's what we're here to talk about today, which is the full report, which has been finalized. So the summary of our findings. For those of you who are engaged in EMS, this is nothing really new, but we like to bring it on a single page. On the left are the agencies that provide service that are based in Lewis County. Their level of service, their staffing model, and things to point out that there are relatively few paramedic level services in the county. There is one agency that has a lot of paid staff. That's Lewis County Search and Rescue. The rest are primarily volunteer, or I should say exclusively volunteer. Lewis County Search and Rescue is primarily paid. They do still have some volunteers. And then let's take a look at the call volume. Although there's 7 agencies that are stationed in the county, there's one that does far and away the most, and that's Lewis County Search and Rescue. They did 75% of the responses So a response, 911 call, or a call from the hospital saying we need someone transported, and vehicles go. You may actually have more than one response for an incident. If you have a call that happens in an area that's served by an EMT ambulance, say West Leiden, they need a paramedic, you would have a paramedic response as well. So you'd have two responses for one incident. As we're looking at the responses, Lewis County Search and Rescue handled 75% of the responses in the county. That's because they have a countywide operating certificate and they do a lot of the advanced life support. They also have staffing available at all times, whereas some of the volunteer agencies notify the dispatcher that we don't have anyone available during these hours. So they'll send a call to search and rescue first. About 20% of the call volume in the county is interfacility transport work. And this was an average from 2022 to 2025. So it was a 4-year sample that we pulled the data from. The next busiest agency outside of Lewis County Search and Rescue dropped down to just 5% of the call volume, and that's the J.S. Coster Hose in Port Leiden. So what do we find as we look at those responses? As I talked about, the vast majority of incidents in the county are responded to by Lewis County Search and Rescue. There are out-of-county agencies that respond to about 9% of Lewis County's incidents. Boonville, Camden, Carthage, and Natural Bridge all respond into the county routinely. This isn't on a mutual aid. This is they have jurisdictions that they're either the primary ambulance or the primary advanced life support that they respond in. The number of interfacility transports being performed by Lewis County Search and Rescue decreased steadily year over year from 2022 to 2025. This is about a 30% decrease. So this is 30% drop in the number that they're doing. During that time, they were responding to more 911 calls. Those interfacility transports still had to happen, and the hospital would have to call other agencies that would come from outside of Lewis County to take people. And that was a decision intentionally that Lewis County Search and Rescue didn't want to do some of these long distance transports that they were being asked to do. There's a need to transport people sometimes hours away to Albany is a regular trip from Lowville to Albany, and the Search and Rescue didn't want to keep that going. And then I talked about the next busiest agency as well, and they're fully volunteer. So all of the other agencies are fully volunteer beyond Search and Rescue. So what were the challenges that we found as we conducted interviews, we gathered data? The number one is staffing. The number of volunteer EMS providers has continued to thin, has declined. The remaining personnel are stretched thin. And we talk about it in terms of volunteer, but it also is impacting Lewis County Search and Rescue. They're having a hard time recruiting and retaining members to staff their ambulances. The cost of operating an ambulance has been going up. So the individual squads who get support often from tax dollars from the community are having to raise more money or go without as the costs are going up. There was a closure of an agency. So Harrisville Rescue Squad decided not to renew their ambulance certificate. So this was a volunteer agency that was working, and they had some challenges with their staffing, and they just decided that they weren't able to do it anymore. So then Lewis County Search and Rescue and Carthage had to step in to cover that area. And another key challenge is there's this proposal from Lewis County Search and Rescue where they wanted to become the sole EMS provider for the county. And the suggestion was that all volunteer agencies would likely cease operations. It wasn't a mandate of the proposal, but the Search and Rescue wanted to have tax support in order to maintain the service or provide a better service than they're able to do today. This caused some friction with the existing volunteer agencies. And there was some concern about how viable this model would be going forward. And as we were doing this study, which was months after the proposal initially was given, there was still some turbulence in the relationships between agencies. We talk about those challenges, but we do want to make sure that everyone recognizes that there are some real important strengths in the community EMS, right? So there's high levels of the interagency collaboration and particularly mutual aid when needed. People will go when they're able to respond when there's the need for help. There's deep institutional knowledge and longevity of service. The people that we met with, we talked with, some of them are new and energetic into the field, but we also have those who have been doing this for a very long time. There is strong local community and municipal support. Individual villages and towns are able to give funding and willing to give funding to the agencies that are providing service in their community. There's strong relationships with the County 911 Center and Air Medical, those two different kind of tangential service providers that support the EMS system. They're both available and able to respond. And then Lewis County General Hospital is a critical resource and has a good working relationship with many of the providers. So, you know, in this box on the right, it is highly evident that the leadership and providers in the county care deeply about their work and want to ensure the highest standard of care. And that's what they're looking for, is help to be able to get there. So we want to be able to highlight these strengths and be able to build on them going forward. This is just a quick summary of when the calls come in. So we break the day down into 6 4-hour time blocks, starting in the middle of the night, building into the middle of the day. And you see in the middle of the night, each one of those 3 different colors are the years that we have there, and it gets busier as the day progresses. And you know, we see during the afternoon, where we are today, is the busiest time of day between noon and 4 p.m. Evening, it begins to drop off a little bit. We mention this because this is where they're creating a lot of stress on your one agency that has paid staff during the day, because the volunteers more often, when they indicate that they're out of service, they're indicating they're out of service during this peak busy time between 8 a.m. and 4 p.m. Okay. And where do the calls happen in Lewis County? EMS calls follow the population. And this was all calls, so it does include the transfers. So it's no surprise that Lowville is the brightest color that you see there, that bright yellow red. But you see where the calls for service occur in the county. There's the corridor that runs through the central part of the county, where a number of the communities are, a number of the services are. But it's also, as you know, a large county. And if you're trying to provide a response out of a single location in the center of the county, you would have a challenge getting to the other areas. With the report itself, you have the URL to be able to turn on this map and look at it and be able to zoom in your own community. You can't zoom into the degree to figure out who called 911 in your community, but you'll see what areas are the busiest. So when you have adult facilities, adult care facilities, or a doctor's office, they will generate more 911 calls than other locations. So I'm going to stop there. Any questions on what I've presented about the what is? Now we'll get into the recommended actions after that. Okay. So we break our recommended actions into 4 categories. The EMS transportation model. This is the ambulances getting the people from where they are to where they need to be. Workforce sustainability. You can have the best ambulances in the world. If you don't have the people to work on them, you're going to be in a challenging situation. We talk about the system operations, and then the bottom line is the system funding. How can you pay for this? So our primary recommendation related to EMS transport is that you consider having Lewis County General Hospital start up an ambulance service. Why? There's need for support with the interfacility primarily, and also back up to the 911 center. Basing it and having it affiliated with the hospital brings several efficiencies. One, when you look at our call volume, the number of calls that they would be taking a day, it's just a handful. Not even that. So what would they be doing when they're not on a call? Well, we can either have them at a station doing training, checking out their equipment, or you can have them based at a hospital. And if they're also a hospital employee, they can be asked to do things inside that hospital between calls. They're able to help with managing patients, doing skills like doing the 12-lead EKG or maybe doing a blood draw. All of these things that they can do between calls. And then when the call happens, particularly if there's an interfacility trip out of the hospital, they're there, ready, and able to go. They would also be able to respond to 911 calls. But the primary role that we think needs to be filled, that gap, is the interfacility work. Billing revenue will support more than half of the operational costs, and we'll go into that on the next slide. There would be substantial capital costs of the ambulance, equipment, and facilities. That is something that definitely needs to be considered. There is the immediate need for supplemental ambulance and potential full-scale service in the future. Creating the supplemental ambulance service based at the hospital might be destabilizing for the workforce because county hospital jobs pay more than search and rescue would likely be able to pay. And that could create a destabilization of the workforce. So we present in the report two potential models. Number one, the one we're really, that's first for a reason, and that's the supplemental service. This is filling that gap that right now these calls that we're calling in an ambulance from outside of the county to handle. This is supplementing the existing services that are here, so adding additional service. That calls for one ambulance staffed with paramedics 24/7. And the second ambulance, we built financially the model with it as paramedic, but you could do it as an EMT level, 16 hours a day, covering the busiest time frames. That would require 13 full-time employees, equivalency, so that some of that could be with part-timers. And we estimate that to be about $1.7 million in operations. And you would be able to bring in about $931,000 in billing off of that. We built that off of 1,095 transports or other billable activities in a year. And the average revenue of that is about $850. There's also that upfront capital costs, right? The ambulance itself is expensive, but there's also the things that go inside it. There's the advanced life support equipment, there's the automatic lifting stretchers, all of that needs to be included. And we did not model what the facility needs would be. We do anticipate it would be located at the hospital, but the scale of our, or the scope of our project didn't involve us getting into that implementation. If you look at what the full scale is, that's essentially doubling everything that we just presented. So that's assuming that you, at this point, are supplanting the existing full-time service, Lewis County Search and Rescue. We don't think this is where your first step should be. We don't think you need to do this. They're still operating. They're still providing that service today. But this is something that you might end up doing in the not too distant future. And so that's 3 ambulances 24/7, which is an increase of 50% over what you have today, which is just 2. And then another ambulance during peak time periods. We believe the demand will be there for that, particularly as volunteers might continue to decline. So all of these costs are essentially doubled as we go forward. Next areas we want to talk about, and I'll get to the money in a couple of slides, is that workforce sustainability. You need to make sure that you have people to staff these ambulances. We need to strengthen that EMS workforce pipeline. There's some suggestions in the report, things like working with the BOCES to have EMT training programs, which already exists, getting some others, strengthen some other relationships and getting that initial EMT training. Facilitate the EMS training, and this involves making sure that every course going forward has availability of hybrid training. The current generation that we're trying to recruit and get into this line of work learns well online. Let's take advantage of that and get them to do that. There's the need for an instructor coordinator. This is someone who helps not only bring people into the field, but sustain those of us who are working in the field. Because when we go to recertify, somebody has to sign off that our education was appropriate. And that's what this person would do. And then something that we've heard and is not new to this body is talking about workforce housing. Where do these workers live? One of the challenges that was shared with us from Search and Rescue was that they have had employees have to leave because they can't afford to live here anymore. They can't, the apartment rents have been going up and they haven't been able to make ends meet. So they're choosing to move and, get a higher hourly wage and move to another community in order to make things meet. And then enhance that basic life support first responder program. These are the people who only go out on the most serious calls and are doing those essential skills in those first 5 or 10 minutes before the ambulance gets there. When you have a large geography like you do, you need to make sure that you can get help there as soon as you can in creative ways. Other recommendations, system operations. You have a talented emergency manager and deputy that are doing a great job right now, but it is one of many hats they are asked to wear. And you really deserve to have a dedicated EMS coordinator whose job it is to lead EMS in this county and support the EMS providers, working in coordination with your existing staff. This is a little bit in the weeds, but your power phone call triage system is not as efficient as the one you used to have in identifying how serious a call is when somebody calls for 911. And this is something that you'll need, in particular if you have different levels of care on the street, to make sure that we have the right resource going to the right call. And then finally, when you have the EMS leaders in the community get together, there's an awful lot of gray hair or receding hair in the room. And we need to facilitate and develop that future leadership to make sure that we have people who are willing to do this job and able to do this job going forward. So finally, let's talk about the money. If you start an ambulance transport service, you're going to be able to bill. But in a community with as dispersed a population as you have, it is, in order to staff to the level to have a good response, you need to have other revenue. You can't just cover your expenses from billing. So what are things that we've seen elsewhere in New York State? There are a couple of counties, or one county, that has put into place a motor vehicle registration tax. You can also choose to designate a portion of your sales or occupancy tax to support EMS. And then we modeled what would it be if all of those costs ended up on your tax bill. So that's the two columns on the right, and that table is the property tax impact. We took a look at the census data. The median home cost in the county was like $190,000. I rounded up to $200,000 to make the math easy. If you were choosing to needed to raise $800,000, which is what we believe you would need for that first model, a median value home would cost about $48 a week, or $48 a year, not a week, $48 a year. And for a larger impact, where we're that full model, we're looking at that $1.6–1.8 million in tax support, and again, we're looking at about $2 per year for that median home value. And that is the end of my slides. I am happy to take questions on any of them. We have additional, really in the weeds data that we would have to advance to get to.
One of the things you mentioned, I believe it's Oneida County has a system where they send somebody in a car to the scene first before an ambulance. Is it Oneida County that has that?
There are a couple of counties that have a county-funded first response agency. I'm not too familiar with Oneida County. I know Tompkins County is doing that.
All right. And then the next thing is, presently we have service. If you go with the hospital model, does a new CON have to be filed for that? And does this whole thing require a whole new certificate of need?
Yes, a certificate of need would be required because the hospital is a county organization. That operating certificate could be obtained by Lewis County through an act of the legislature. There's a long step process that we go into to kind of the high level, but there's no appeal. There's no request. There's a presumption that the governing body knows what it needs. So the governing body of the county could declare, we are going to get an operating certificate from New York State, and then you have 2 years with which to prove that there was a need, and then you have to get that request or get that certificate turned into a permanent one after 2 years. I'm going to look over my shoulder. None of those have been rejected yet. Is that correct? Every municipal operating certificate has been converted to a permanent operating certificate in the 30 years since they've had this pathway.
Can I follow that up? A county can have multiple certificates of need, correct? That's not an either or, that can be multiple.
The county government itself could have your operating certificate that we would suggest that you would go for on this is the top one, which is the paramedic transport certificate. Once you have that, you don't need to get a lesser one.
Any other questions? If not, it was very detailed, and there's a meeting later this evening amongst the group who can attend, and I'm sure there's more details that will be discussed at that time.
Yep.
No other questions at all? If not, thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, we will now move into draft resolutions and motions.
Draft resolution number 1, authorizing a 3-year renewal agreement with NCC Systems for fire alarm inspection services at the Lewis County Courthouse, Public Safety Building, and Emergency Management Garage. The agreement covers the period from January 1st, 2026 through December 31st, 2028, at a total cost not to exceed $9,755 to be funded through the Buildings and Grounds Professional Services budget line.
I move that draft resolution number 1 be forwarded to the full board for action. Can I have a second? Benny? Any discussion? It's been moved and second that draft resolution number 1 be forwarded to the full board for action. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion is adopted.
Draft resolution number 2, awarding the bid and authorizing an agreement with Rhino Coating LLC to provide sealing and striping services for various county parking lots, including the highway garage, outdoor services, DMV, human services, and public safety building. The project will be completed between June 8th, 2026 and September 28th, 2026 at a total cost not to exceed $66,215.10 to be funded through the Buildings and Grounds Professional Services account.
I move that draft resolution number 2 be forwarded to the full board for action. Can I have a second? Tom? Any discussion? All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion is adopted.
Draft resolution number 3, authorizing supplemental agreement number 1 with Barton and LaJudas for additional engineering services related to the Cotel Road culvert replacement project over the south branch of Crystal Creek in the town of Watson. Supplemental agreement covers construction, construction inspection, and construction support services from April 27, 2026 through December 31st, 2027, at an additional cost not to exceed $153,000, bringing the total project engineering cost to $333,000, fully reimbursable through Bridge New York culvert funding.
I move that draft resolution number 3 be forwarded to the full board for action. Can I have a second? Mike? It's been moved and second that draft resolution number 3 be forwarded to the full board for action. All in favor, say aye. Opposed? Motion is adopted.
Draft resolution number 4, authorizing an interfund loan and memorandum of understanding between the County of Lewis and the Lewis County Highway Department to finance 2026 machinery and equipment purchases under the Highway Department's capital equipment plan. The agreement authorizes the transfer of up to $514,980 from the county's general fund to the county machinery fund for the purchase of a CAT skid steer, Viking plow, and Western Star cabin chassis with repayment to the county over 5 years at no interest.
I move that draft resolution number 4 be forwarded to the full board for action. Can I have a second? Mike again. Any discussion?
I have a question, Mr. Chairman. I noticed that it said it's been brought forward by the chair of the Finance and Rules Committee. Why is it appearing in front of the General Service? Just because it's county highway, or should this be in front of Finance and Rules?
I believe with the,
That is a typo. It should be under this committee.
Okay, so it is under, all right,
Correct.
so that would be amended then. Thank you.
thank you. Any other discussion? It's been moved and second, and that draft resolution number 4 be forwarded to the full board for action. All in favor, say aye. Opposed? Motion is adopted. There is no unfinished business. New business, have an update from our county highway superintendent, John Reed, with regards to road closure updates.
Good afternoon. I'd just like to bring it to everybody's attention on a number 4 road between Markowski Road and East Martinsburg Road. Over the weekend, we found that we had a dimple in the road and it's getting bigger by the hour. So I chose to put up our traffic lights. We're closing it down to 1 lane. Once the water goes down, we'll get a better look at it, but it's a major structure. It's pretty big. So I just want to bring it to your attention so that if you get asked questions, we are where we're at with it right now. I'll be talking with the DEC to get an emergency work permit. I've already contacted steel companies to find out how much a structure is going to cost. It's 12 foot wide, 8 foot 6 inches high, and 100 feet long. It's a superstructure that is bolted together. To have that done by a contractor would cost a substantial amount of money. My goal is to do it in-house, but we have to wait until the water goes down. So what this structure does is it is a in the floodplain for the Black River, and so this is an equalizer for the floodplain to help relieve the pressure off of the Black River Bridge right there in right next to the boat launch. So we are waiting till the water goes down till we can see what is up with it. I also have Matt Schooley from B&L Engineering. He's meeting me at 8 o'clock tomorrow morning. We're probably not going to see too much because the water's still going to be up. My guess is there's a hole in it somewheres, probably in the bottom. The goal was with the grant that Grace Metzler and Cassandra Buell are trying to get for us to raise the East Martinsburg Road. We're also including those two structures, those two equalizers, as, you know, they're pretty old, so I was trying to include those into it to get those replaced at the same time. But that's down the road and we need to act now. So I will keep you updated. Does anybody have any questions? Right now, the quickest that we could get that structure, and I don't even know how much it is, it's over 2 months out. So, which that's not a bad thing because then the water will be down. So at that time of year, as long as we don't get any major rainstorms, it should be dry. So we'll be able to get the work done efficiently.
I have one question. You said it's on one lane of the road.
Correct.
Is there any danger that it could extend to the whole road?
Not at this moment. I went down in Saturday. I went and looked at it and you can almost see an impression on, it's near the guide rails. It's in the driving lane, but it's on the southern side of the roadway. So you can almost see an impression in the top of the pipe. So it's either seeping down around the side of the pipe and the water from, that water runs both ways as the river rises. It backflows. Right now it's backflowing into the fields. Here in a little while, it'll change directions and backflow back to the river again. So it's got a back and forth action there, which raises a lot of concerns, so, of losing aggregate. So, thank you.
Thank you, Johnny. All right, no new business, no executive session. With that, I would move to adjourn the meeting. Can I get a second? Jeff, all in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Anyone opposed? We are adjourned.
Lewis County Human Services Committee is called to order. Clerk of the board, proceed with roll call, please.
Legislator Calamus,
Here.
Legislator Frost,
Here.
Legislator Nortz,
Here.
Legislator Hano,
Here.
Legislator Lindecker,
Here.
and Legislator Dahlhoff.
Here.
I move to approve the committee meeting minutes on 4/28/26. Do I have a second? Vinnie? Any discussion? If not, all in favor? Aye. Anyone opposed? Motion adopted. We do have two presentations. The first one is social media generational impacts. Caitlin Lawyer, Youth Services Coordinator.
Everyone. Thank you for having me in. I feel like I was just here a little while ago. Today I wanted to do a presentation on, like the title says, social media generational impacts, just because the Youth Bureau now has a lot of initiatives, such as the Screenagers Project, that's kind of focused on encouraging kids to step away from the devices that are now so small and easy to just carry around with us and have everything accessible on them, to get them involved more in programming, getting outside, being active, arts and crafts and things like that. But the number one thing I think about too, and I'll highlight this during the presentation, is making sure there's still a lot of socialization happening in person. And so there's that divide between the virtual world and that we're still maintaining relationships and conversations in the real world. So before I dive into this, I just also wanted to say this presentation is a lot about awareness. So I'm not like bashing screen time technology. Our society is thriving on that. We absolutely need it. I couldn't make this presentation and be presenting it without it. So I'm more focusing on when we're not at work, when I'm talking to kids, when they're not at school or working on their homework, during those times when we need to stop and think, do we need to be still turning to these screens? And could we be using that time more wisely? And especially if I'm focusing on social media, I'm not judging anyone that uses it or has it. I'm just trying to raise awareness about if we are using it, what's the impact it's having on us? What are we getting out of it? Is it beneficial in any ways? So, all right, with that, just as an overview, since we are living in the digital age right now, what I consider that, like I said, outside of the workday and everything, is especially when you're thinking about social media, it's more of people, the nonstop scrolling. So you're kind of consuming bottomless feeds of content that's mixed in with a lot of ads that are thrown at you. I think we all know nowadays, if you're talking about something in person with someone, then you start to realize that you're getting ad pop-ups on your phone, on social media, even through emails. And it's kind of a little scary to know that our phones are listening, taking that in, and then throwing it back at us. So just the amount of time, I think people aren't aware of that. When you start scrolling, there's almost like this rabbit hole, you get lost in it. And then it's like, what else could I have been doing? Did I just miss out on something? Or really, what did I get out of all that time I just spent looking at everything? It's attention stealing. So it's time, stealing our time, the amount of time we spend on it, but it's also stealing our attention. It can cause a lot of interruptions in day-to-day activities. A lot of times I think if we're focusing on a project now, we may see our phone light up next to us, since a lot of us have it right near us and we have it facing upwards. We might see a notification or hear a sound go off, and it's almost like you have to take that time to look away, check on what that is. I found it too interesting. Sometimes I'll be having conversations in person with people, and I totally understand if they're like, hold on, my kid is calling, or work, or I have an emergency. But I don't know if anyone else has had that moment where it's like you're talking to someone and then they just start looking down through their phone. And so I've just stopped talking, wait for them to like look back up, pay attention. And sometimes they'll be like, oh, sorry. Other times it's just like, okay, what were you saying? So we need to make sure we're still not being rude, like paying attention to those we are connected to and around physically. Obviously, I talked a little bit about distractions. It can just take our mind away from things. Connecting us to everyone in the world. I get that a lot when I ask people, like, what do you get out of using social media? What is the benefit to you? The number one answer I find response is like, oh, I have these connections. I can stay in touch with people I used to know a while ago back from college, or people that have moved across the country. But there's just that reminder of we need to remember to stay connected to those people that are still physically around us. it's interesting when I go out to like restaurants, you see the group of people that are around each other and they're in that moment together, but a lot of them are just staring at their screens. When I go into waiting rooms, I went to my dentist's office a couple of weeks ago, and there used to be like a little play area for kids set up. There used to be magazines, books. Now there's nothing. And you just walk in and everyone's just looking at those little screens. Even parent with their kid, they're both on separate devices. So I feel like there's almost this disconnect, and I call it like avoidance too. Sometimes I feel like we're avoiding having conversations if we're walking into a room with new people. Like if you ever go to a conference and you're going to sit at a table, a lot of people are looking at their phones. Even if you just used to be waiting in line for something, you used to get to know strangers. And I feel like we're kind of avoiding that a little bit. There's a really good video. It's called Look Up. I think it's by Gary Turk, but I recommend you look at that because I mean the title says it all. Look it up from our phones, and it tells this cute story of like a guy was looking for a place he had written down on a piece of paper. He couldn't find it. Someone else gave him the directions. They ended up getting married and their whole life story, everything like that. But nowadays it kind of rewound the tape and went back to him just following directions on the phone. So two people just completely walking past each other, never getting that opportunity to meet. So things like that. Then phone use, I think, has just become automatic. It's just something we always have with us. I feel like I put it up there called the itch. Like I always am curious how often people can go before they look at it, like, or if we don't have it on us, do we have that feeling of panic and almost like we're a little lost because we lost our device? So this is just a quick project timeline, and I got a lot of this from the Anxious Generation book, which I highly recommend everyone read. It is absolutely amazing. I have a copy if anyone wants to borrow it. It is very highlighted because there's lots of great stuff in there that I wanted to remember, but just as like an overview before I get into the other sections. So the smartphone came out in 2007. Before that, there were phones, there were devices that you could use, but most people were just calling people back when you could make sure you remembered phone numbers and things like that. In 2010, the front-facing camera came out, so that was kind of the era of selfies starting to come because you can automatically look at what you're taking a picture of instead of taking it from the other side and having to go back and make sure you got the angle and everything right. 2012 is when social media and platforms came out, and then within that timeline, slightly afterwards, there was also filters on certain apps to edit your pictures. There was YouTube, Reddit, multiplayer video games. So in that book, 2012 is when you see, and he puts lots of graphs in it to explain it really well. You see like a skyrocket in mental health, depression, anxiety increased dramatically, loneliness. Even though you had these devices to connect people, people were feeling more lonely, which is very interesting. And a lot of people were always questioning in the book, like it could be something else going on. And he does a very good job. I'm not going to spend too much time explaining it, but kind of eliminating all the other factors and pinpointing it to there's obviously a correlation with social media and these platforms and some of these increases in anxiety and depression and things like that. So, and then now in this year in 2026, we're living in the age where this technology is ever evolving. So now there's the glasses that you can wear and you will never know if someone is looking at something else or if they're taking pictures or if they're recording anything. And I can't imagine what's going to come out in the future. So like I said, I kind of wanted to talk about all the generations because I feel like screen time, social media impacts all of us in different ways. Obviously, when we're talking about the youth, they're in those developmental years. So the brain is being developed, the neural pathways are being structured. Certain pathways that were around are being discontinued because they're not necessary. Other ones are being built and strengthened. So if they're constantly seeing this material, if they're constantly looking at a screen and that type of like scrolling and games and shows and things like that, we have to just take a step back and think about what impact that's having. A lot of that has to do with like the dopamine reward system. So if you can tell certain kids if they have like an outburst, they're going to calm down a lot more if you give them an iPad or a phone or something like that. And that's just a sign it's playing a role in their emotional regulation, which we should be aware of. They can get dopamine and they can get better dopamine and oxytocin reactions if they're having more interactions in person. Like if they get a hug or validation instead of like a like or something like that, they get a response from someone that they're close to. That's gonna mean a lot more. The lack of sleep kind of plays into this too. When we talk about youth, they're in those, again, developmental years where they need to get a lot more sleep than we actually need. So just making sure if they're taking their phone in the bedroom with them, they're probably going to be up on it later. They're going to wake up if it goes off. They are going to be okay if you just give them a normal alarm clock. Lack of socialization and human connection. So like I said, I kind of highlight a lot the socialization in person. So making sure, I feel like a lot of the younger generation now has more social anxiety. They're a little more afraid to look people in the eyes, have that eye contact. They're not necessarily growing up learning how to read those social cues like body language, tone, things like that. Not knowing what to do in front of a large group of people or when they meet strangers. And I thought it was interesting too. I talked to some of the schools and staff since the cell phone ban, and they say the hallways and the lunchroom have gotten a lot louder, which I just, I like that. I mean, that means instead of them all, when they have these breaks in between when they're in classrooms, they're not looking down, they're actually talking to each other again, which they should be. I already kind of mentioned depression, anxiety for youth especially has just skyrocketed since 2012. So there's that correlation, and just being aware of that. They have, in certain studies and research, have said they're twice as lonely as the elderly. So again, they have the connections, but why are they feeling so lonely? There's a lot of emphasis on social comparisons and validations. I feel like when we talk about social media, it's almost a place where people can go to judge one another. And this is really hard on young girls. They're going to have like the body image that can lead to like eating disorders and things like that because they feel like they have to look a certain way or if they have to portray themselves a certain way. And I feel like a lot of social reactions, interactions on these platforms are due to people wanting likes and wanting comments. Sometimes certain people may post something and then they're just waiting to see who responds to it, how many likes they get. If they don't get any, how is that making them feel? And again, our validation shouldn't be just determined simply on that. And I always try and ask people to, what is the purpose of your post? Just try and stop and think about, what are you trying to get out there? What's the impact going to be on others? And what are you trying to get back in return from that? And then exploitation, I could do a whole presentation on that, which I have, but that takes about an hour and it gets into trafficking and things like that. But just being aware, especially as parents, if you're giving kids these devices, the internet kind of opened up the doors on that. The ability to be anonymous is so easy now. On a lot of these platforms, people can create profiles saying they're a certain age, making themselves look a certain way. That doesn't mean that's who they're actually talking to, and youth don't always expect that or necessarily thinking about that. So I always like to let people know, because I know a lot of kids in my life that I know that use the game Roblox. It's very popular, but I'm probably getting an alert at least once a week about something, or another parent pressing lawsuits against that game because something has happened. And if you think about it from a predator's point of view, it's kind of like, almost, it's creepy for me to say this, but like a paradise for them to go to if they're looking to interact with kids. I mean, it's a game where they can be anonymous, and that's where all the kids are playing. There's no adults playing those games. So, and I think it was last month, one of the people that helps program and create Roblox was arrested for having explicit material of children on their computer. So I always like to highlight that, but just in general, being aware of, if you do have a kid and you're giving them a device, having those conversations about what they could run into, and to always come talk to a trusted adult about it. And then addiction, this has even come from kids themselves saying they're aware that they're constantly using this and they're kind of hooked on it, but they just can't stop. And that's part of because they grew up surrounded by it. Everyone is using it, and they already are hooked on that reward pathway. So now when I talk about us adults, just being aware that making sure we're still spending as much time parenting. Both parents are usually working nowadays, and then I had this problem of when I get done with a day and I come home, I still bring a lot of my work with me, and I had to learn to kind of set those own boundaries to like leave some stuff at the office unless it's urgent, and then make sure I'm just interacting with those people that I'm around. They talk about overprotection and underprotection in the Anxious Generation book, which I think is really great because it makes sense if you think about it. Overprotection is referring to when Stranger Danger came out, and it's like parents didn't want to let kids out of their sights because you never know what's going to happen. Someone could take them or interact with them, something bad. But there's almost this underprotection of not having that fear of giving them a device. And I mean, we can't constantly be looking over their shoulders. But we also need to be just as aware that that opens up doors a lot more easily than if they were going to go walk themselves to the playground or something like that. We also need to learn to be role models. We are using technology just as much, so we can influence those around us and obviously the younger generation. So they can set their own boundaries. We can also help set boundaries and just set that good example of you don't always need it. Certain kids have even said, you know, they tried to have conversation with their parents, but they were too distracted answering work emails or looking at news articles and things like that. So again, just being present, oversharing is a big thing. And that's also something I'm trying to understand more about social media and just society nowadays, because I feel like we all have this urge to just share a lot. And again, what's the purpose of sharing so much and how much are we actually giving away? You can share what your lifestyle is, where you work, where you live. People are oversharing their opinions, thoughts, attitudes, things that they wouldn't usually have in a normal conversation when you're face to face with someone. So I always just ask people, what's the purpose of that? I'm happy that Kaylee always reminds me around back to school time to put that reminder on our social media platform to get out there to parents. If your kids are going back to school, just be aware if you're putting what grade they're in, where they go to school, what sport they play. Some people even include all their likes, things that they have interest in, because that could just lead to other conversations. And sometimes as adults, I think we need to stop and think about, if we're doing that for our kids too, why do we share so much about our own selves? What's the need and what's the purpose? I also had in here, I didn't want to forget, it's like sharing pieces of ourselves, but we're also peeking into other people's lives. But oversharing, we have to stop and think about the privacy. And sometimes we don't know that we're sharing, even having phones. They're always like listening. If you're scrolling through things, it knows where your eyes are looking on the screen, collecting that data. So even if we have private meetings and things like that, it doesn't necessarily mean it's getting out somewhere, but I still feel like that information is being heard, collected, and we don't know what's happening to it. This kind of ties into the next bullet about loss of focus, productivity, and engagement. I kind of mentioned this earlier. You could find yourself multitasking a lot more, losing focus on one single project. I'm also worried that there's like a loss of our own creativity and being logical, because it makes it so easy now to just use ChatGPT or to Google something or use AI to get an answer. I just worry that people aren't taking that time to stop and think it through on our own before automatically finding the answer. And that kind of leads into making sure you're finding the right answers, not just getting misinformation that automatically pops up or is collected from other answers on the internet and things like that. I feel like with the focus, we're constantly having the need to check, make sure we're almost not missing out on anything. When it comes to exchanges on posts and issues, that's kind of where the judgment comes in. We say things we normally wouldn't behind a screen, but I've had some people tell me they got nervous starting a new job because they knew that everyone had looked them up on social media first and made like a predetermined judgment of who they were. Even though that person had the social media that they could look up, it's still like we're judging people before we even meet them, get to know them. I think there's a lot of rifts happening between friends, family members, coworkers, because we're seeing certain things or forming opinions based off what other people are sharing, what they're saying. So just being aware of that. Also, I think a lot of people in this room, if you're more of like a public figure and things like that, you have to be aware that if you have social media and or posting anything online in that matter, or looking things up, just be prepared to be a target for others. You have to know how to handle that, because you might not do anything, but a lot of other people are just going to make comments, put things out there. I don't know if anyone has said anything bad about me or the Youth Bureau lately, because I just don't see it, so I don't have to worry about it. And then finally, the mood and personal well-being. I think this is very important, because that's where I had the connection. Like, I haven't had social media. I used to have Facebook, Instagram. I gave it up over a year ago. I was one of those types that's like, I'm not completely isolated. I still socialize. I don't spend all my time online. But I found that I feel a lot better now that I don't have any of it. Like I said, if people are talking about, did you see so and so posted this? I'm just like, nope, I have no idea, and it doesn't really bother me. But I think people aren't aware of the content. The content is made to be more negative. It's made to make people feel angry, to feel sad, to feel scared. And that fascinated me for a while I was doing this research, because I was like, when people want to see things that made them feel happier or more grateful, but it doesn't keep our interests. Like reality TV shows, there has to be that drama factor. If we were all just watching the Truman Show where he's all happy all the time, I think people just get bored. So it's the same thing. The content is not necessarily going to be all positive, and we have to realize, is that making us feel a certain way? If you start off your day first thing looking at some of these things and it's more negative and not the best, that can impact our tone, our mood for the entire day, for longer than that. So that's something, like I said, I didn't realize. I had to take the step back, and I was like, I think all these platforms are making me more stressed than I need to be, making me more worried. And it wasn't upfront in my face that I knew that. Like, I had to do that detox and really take a look at everything. So when it comes to the elderly, the number one thing is basically they're more vulnerable to scams and fraud. They can also be for misinformation, but the next couple bullets don't necessarily apply. I feel like it can be split. Like, I feel like as people are getting older and they can still be active, sometimes they might gravitate towards the phones and stuff more and lose that desire to go do the physical things that they still can. But there is a huge benefit, I think, to people that aren't necessarily as mobile, can't get around. They have these devices and they can still talk to people as long as they use it with a good intent. There's some research I was reading about where if they're doing puzzles, if they're reading, if they're doing positive things that are interacting, it's helping them keep their mentality and their mindset and things like that. So I think for the elderly, there's actually a lot of benefits when it comes to screen time, because it still gives them something that they can do. So this is my last slide, just an overall analysis of everything that I just discussed and kind of all grouped together. I think we need to focus on digital wellness. So just making sure that excessive screen time just can disrupt sleep, increase stress, and drains our energy and our emotions too. The result is tired, distracted employees or students who struggle with focus, make more mistakes, and experience higher levels of burnout. We can let our own selves be impacted negatively. So if we are going to use, just make sure we have, it's called digital stewardship, knowing what we're posting and what impact that can have on other people, but also knowing what impact of everything that we're taking in, what that does to us. I kind of covered it a little bit, but the content being consumed, make sure that if you're done scrolling, just stop and take a pause and be like, do I feel a lot better? Or did that make me feel a little more drained or a little more sad or a little more upset about something? And do I need that in my life? Setting our own accountability. So knowing when to put the screens away, when we can take a break, make sure we're not spending an excessive amount of time on them, teaching the responsibility to our youth, being that role model. I set boundaries in one way. Even though I don't have social media, I still try and set boundaries on screen time in general. So I don't allow phones at dinner time. Or if you're going to be having a meal with me, I would just prefer that we don't need it. We're going to eat food and we're going to converse together in person. I also, for awareness, I wanted to make sure I didn't forget this, just being aware, like I said, of what we're taking in and the impacts and everything, but I worry sometimes about awareness of our environment. I feel like sometimes since people are so much looking down at their screens, there could be someone walking into a room that might not have a good intention. There could be a fire that starts. How long does it take people to notice things like that? And what impact does that have? I mean, I'm sure we've all seen videos at certain trainings now too, where there's something like a fire or there's a fight happening and people are just, instead of getting out, getting help, seeking shelter and safety for themselves, they feel this need to record it and then go post it for some reason. And then ad revenue, just making sure that the data is constantly being collected and what are they doing with it, like our location, our travel history, our purchase history, everything like that. Basically, social media is free, and that's for a reason. We are the product, not the consumer. They want us to spend as much time as possible to get that data and to use it in ways that we don't really know. All right. Any questions? I smushed a lot in a short period of time, but I appreciate you having me in, and you're always welcome to come find me and have conversations or borrow that book I talked about.
Yeah, I would say it's interesting, when you start looking at data centers, energy demand costs that we all dislike, but we're contributing to that demand and the data centers ourselves by constantly using our phones.
Yep.
Yeah. Thank you, Kate.
Thank you.
Our next presentation, Lewis County Employment and Training in the Lewis County Workplace. Lisa Hetzler, Staff and Workforce Development Coordinator. You don't have a phone with you, do you?
Oh, appreciate that. Thank you. Okay, I've got to do a test. I've never done this. Okay. All right. Well, I'm Lisa Hetzner from the Department of Social Services. I'm the Staff and Employment and Training Coordinator for Lewis County, and I'm going to talk to you about the workplace. And feel free to ask questions. So, just to give a brief understanding of my department, we are all DSS employees, but we are split. We are also known as the Career Center. We're known as the Workplace. Depending on if you're looking at federal funding, state funding, we have a couple of different titles. So as the director, my salary is split between DSS and WIOA funding. And then Tom Fulmer, who is my business services rep, is the rest of the funding that we get for workforce projects. And then once that salary piece is taken care of, we spend the rest of our funds on people in the community looking for work. And so I just thought it would be interesting if you didn't know who makes up our staff. This is who's working on it. Anyone under DSS can pinch hit and do good enough to help out with workplace because we're all focused on working in employment programs. So now, you ask, why do I have TA and employment caseload up here? And the reason being, because we are funded by DSS, it's kind of important to understand, in my opinion, who are we actually working with? So when I did the stats last week, we had 26 child-only cases. So what that means, those are children only who are getting some sort of benefit from the Department of Social Services. The other 38 are TANF and safety net cases. So that's what my unit is working with, those 38. And then if we broke it down a little bit further, we've got 10. And when I say TANF, I mean family assistance, cases with kids in the household. And then the other 18 are adults over the age of 18. So that's what the current makeup looks like for my staff who are working with DSS programs. Now I realize that this is really small. Jenny said I had too many words and I had to make less words, but I think this is maybe really small. So when I look at the makeup of our caseload, I know there's always a lot of questions about who's on DSS services, who's getting public assistance. And so I went through the caseload and we had 18 cases where people are unable to work. I don't make that determination. That's made by a doctor, a physician, a social worker, somebody who's working with the clients and is determined they cannot work at this time. Then we had 3 clients that were unable to work due to substance abuse treatment at this time. So typically that 18 stays pretty steady. They're clients who are typically applying for Social Security or SSDI, but the clients that are getting substance abuse treatment, that number will change because people move through the treatment cycle. We have identified 9 clients that the district also agreed with who should be pursuing Social Security or SSDI. So you'll notice the numbers are getting smaller. Clients who are work limited. So that means they still have either a mental health or a physical impairment that is somehow limiting them from completely working and being completely independent. So there's 5 right now, 5 people in Lewis County out of our roughly 27,000. Clients who are fully able to work without any limitations, 1. And if you ask the commissioner, she'd tell me that number was 0. But I have to go with what the medical says, and that's what the medical's saying for that one person. So one person out of 27,000 who is fully able to work and is not currently engaged in employment and being able to be independent. We have one client over the age of 60 who is on temporary assistance and is not in receipt of Social Security retirement, SSI or SSDI. And then there is a category for family members who are caring for somebody who is disabled. So we have one case where someone is caring for a disabled household member. So that's that makeup of those 38 clients. So now you ask, what are you doing with your time? So this is how we spend our time now. Because a large population for us are unable to work, my unit does monthly tracking, and because the state, obviously, OTDA, wants records. If they're not working, what are they doing? So we track their attendance at programs, mental health, physical therapy, things like that, PT, and we're collecting their medical records. So that's a form called the LDSS 4526, and then we get stacks of medical records to look through. By far, my favorite part of my job. Not because I want people to be unwell. It's an incredible learning opportunity. I'm not a doctor, but boy, I've learned a whole lot. So, and then my job and my team's is to decide, do we need to refer them to IMA, which is an independent medical exam? If you've ever had anyone applying for Social Security, you'd be familiar with that term. Or we also have a relationship with Lewis County Health Systems for a functional capacity test. And that just provides us more information. Sometimes the doctors need it in order to decide, can they work or are they limited? And everybody who comes in has to do an orientation with my staff. And we also do TABE testing to determine academically where are they at right now. Just because people have gotten a high school diploma doesn't mean they're able to read and write. So that's important for us as we work with them. And then we do a lot of referrals to community partners, either trying to help people directly get Social Security or Social Security disability. Maybe if they're disabled, we want to get a connection to them with NERCL. It's kind of looking at them holistically. What's going on? What are their barriers? Because our job is to move them towards whatever level of independence that looks like for them. And then in addition, if they're working with us at the Department of Social Services, we have to make sure that they have transportation to get to and from their appointments with us. Any questions? You guys are being really generous. Now I figured this one was going to give questions. Okay. So here's the focus on those that are able to work. So you'll see in the middle of that bubble, they have to meet with us either weekly or bi-weekly. So we're checking in with them regularly. They come in person unless they are working. We do have clients on temporary assistance who are working. And typically, now that there's an earned income disregard, those clients can stay on temporary assistance if they stay under 200% of the poverty level for up to 6 months. But they're doing a weekly job search. So who here is a business owner? Ooh, hello, Peanut Gallery. Hi, folks. Okay, so if you're a business owner, chances are my team could have called and asked, did so-and-so apply there? We're tracking their application. Just like unemployment insurance is doing now, we have to verify their job searches. They're also doing a work experience. So what that means is government, nonprofits, schools, they basically need to take their temporary assistance, so their cash, their SNAP, we divide it by state minimum wage, and that's the number of hours that they need to work. So if they're homeless, it could be up to 40 hours a week. We are looking for those placements. So here's my pitch to everybody in this room. When I call or my team is calling, it's because they have work activities and we need to try to get them engaged in those activities. So try not to say no to us, because then we have to persistently call. And we really need to try to help folks. They also need to do either GED or literacy services if they have not gotten their high school diploma. Some folks are already engaged in programming through WIOA, Workforce Development. They might be in college or they might be in BOCES. And if they're doing that, then we give them the credit for the time they're spending there. And this same population also has to do orientation and TABE testing in order to get opened. Any questions about this population? Okay. So If you've read the news at all in the last few months, there's a lot of information out about SNAP ABODs, and it's a bit confusing. So if you have a child in your household who's under the age of 14, you do not have to do SNAP work rules. It's only if your child is above the age of 14. So who we're really talking about are single adults ages 18 to 64 and what we call single childless couples. This is an additional group of folks who have to do additional work rules in order to keep their SNAP. So again, if people in the community are reaching out to your departments and asking, can I volunteer? It's because it's one of the options that an ABOD can do in order to maintain their SNAP. So for someone on SNAP who is an ABOD, these are the options that they have available to them. They either need to be working at least 80 hours a month, doing in-kind work, which could be someone is living with you and they're doing activities around your home in lieu of maybe a portion of the rent or some of the rent, participating in a qualifying training program, doing an employment program through my department, or if you're a veteran, through the Veterans Department, or what's called 80 hours of WIOA job search. So for the month, they've got to track their job search. And unfortunately, we've had people every month who aren't able to get to the 80, but they've at least made an effort. People who are volunteering in the community. Again, so those folks that are calling you asking, can I volunteer here? The words might not be right, but the answer hopefully from you guys is yes, because we want people to eat. And this is one of the ways that they can do that. And then a WEP is one set up specifically by Department of Social Services where we do the tracking of it and have a little more communication. Any questions on the ABOD work rules? Okay. So that's the DSS part that employs us and why I stand here. Now you really want to know about the workplace. So both DSS and the workplace have youth and young adult programs. So right now, we are right in the middle of our SYEP program. So SYEP has been around a long time. We have people in the employment of the county who came through SYEP. So it is a work program targeted at this time for students 14 to 20. Can't be younger, you can't be older, and you have to be under 200% of the poverty level. So I will give you an example. We recently just completed an application determining eligibility for a family of 10 who is living on less than $20,000 a year. Now, absolutely would they be eligible for programs through the Department of Social Services, but they don't choose to use it, so we use the 200% of funding guidelines. Obviously, we're going to do a little outreach and ask them if they would like to, but we see a lot of our youth meet the 200% of poverty guidelines. Their families do not get any benefit from the Department of Social Services. What's important about this is the funding has stayed static in this program for the last 15 years that I have been here. The only change has been just for the increase in minimum wage, which means roughly we're putting on between 15 to 30 kids each year, depending on the work sites and the students that we get. And the ages change every year. And as I just shared with Jenny today, again, discovering our kids that are under 16 can't paint. There isn't probably a person in this room who has had children who didn't have some sort of painting project that they asked them to do. And that's the difference. Department of Labor tells us what we can and cannot do, not what we allowed our children to do. So our mobile crew this year is typically made up of students who are 14 and 15, who can't run a lawnmower, can't run a weed whacker by Department of Labor regulations. And they go around and help out in our nonprofits and community agencies, cemeteries, and they're doing a lot of work by hand. And we have a summer youth counselor this year who will pick them up because obviously transportation is an issue. She'll take them to the work sites and then keep an eye on the kids while they're there. And so it had been a few years since we'd done a mobile crew. And then we also have funding through workforce development for both in-school and out-of-school youth. Slightly different age range. But again, the target is to try to keep our youth here and to get them working very much in what Caitlin is supporting in her Get Off Your Phone and Be Present. Now, I will have to say that previously to this year, the county supported an additional $30,000, which allowed us to put on up to 15 to 20 additional students each summer for students that were slightly over the 200% of the poverty level. no pressure, Tim, but I'd love for you to reconsider that and legislators, because we've had so many families calling who had kids eligible last year and this year they aren't because they don't meet the 200%. But 3 years is a long time for a program, for people to know it exists. And that's what we want. We want our kids working. So this year, our SYP numbers are down because so many students are already working in businesses around here. Don't worry, we're going to spend all of our funds. We always do. But we still have kids, especially that BOCES part. That target is really important for me and I think the county. Those are the youth that are filling in our trades and are entering the workforce, and any opportunity we can give an employer to basically onboard them, check them out as a future employee, or plant that seed that, yes, go away, but come back. Their jobs here is really important. And largely that was what a lot of those kids were in that program. Okay, sorry about that. Any questions on summer youth programs? Okay. So Career Jam just happened. This is a partnership between Jefferson and Lewis counties. And has anybody here ever been to Career Jam or had your children go? Don't everybody raise their hand. You guys are a tough crowd. So what's really important is typically 8th grade students, but every school district can choose what they're sending. They get thousands of kids that come in, and it's a chance to explore careers that are in our area. And that's what it's about. Just like the gentleman who presented earlier and talked about the EMS pipeline, you've got to plant those seeds early. And so Career Jam gives people an opportunity to come in and tangibly touch it and talk to people about how did you get there? What do you do? I'm going to jump back a slide for a second. So part of our youth and young adult programs is we do a Life Hacks Day every year, typically in the first week of August. And our Life Hacks Day is based on the debrief that we do with the kids from the previous year. What did they like? What didn't they like? And what do they want to see next year? So for this year, we are going to have hopefully EMS, and we're going to have DEC. Our Sheriff's Department was great. The investigators came in and they literally talked to the kids about how they developed their career path, and then they put them in a setup and walked through a traffic stop with the kids. And the kids were able to ask questions, and it was funny, but that's what creates interest for them. And they, again, we had local people come back to the area after they left. And so it's really important. We partner with BOCES and we teach the kids, how do you change a tire? How do you change the oil in the car? Not everybody has these resources at home. And so this is how our Life Hacks has turned out, is to really be, what are the kids looking for? They want to know about Whole Foods. I didn't know what Whole Foods were because I don't cook. So for me, it was really important to look, but really it's Lewis County. People plant gardens and they have Whole Foods, and the kids wanted to know, how to use them. How do I make this? Because I do the grocery shopping for my family and I need to provide healthy meals. The kids are incredibly bright and brilliant, and I never miss Life Hack Day because I really love getting to know the kids. Okay. Now, the workplace. So if you haven't met Tom Fulmer, he is a transplant, came to us from Philly, chose the North Country because he loves the snow, and after his first winter finally broke down and got a snowblower. He lives in Copenhagen. We tried to really explain to him that he needed a snowblower. So Tom is the one that I give all the credit to for how wonderful our Facebook page and our, this isn't Facebook, this is the website. Do you guys have access to hop on there and show them the website when I get there? Oh, I got to hurry it up. I'm sorry. I'm super chatty. Okay. So I have a bunch of stats, but what's important is, thanks, Tim, for letting us have our Facebook page back, because we're up to 1.5 thousand followers. And if you look, I know it's social media, so it's bad to talk about, but we're getting a lot of traction, and it's really great that it's back. So this is what we do. We will post your jobs for free. Please take the time. For anybody that has the presentation, Tom has done a wonderful job with the website, and it's free. That's what we try to remind businesses and people. This is free. We will list your jobs. We will try to job match for you. We do a lot of, unfortunately, unemployment assistance in there. And because of the amount we were doing, the Department of Labor has now increased their presence to 2 days a week once we started to track those numbers. And we've worked with Kraft. They did a recruitment event in 25. They've used our offices in the Human Services Building for leadership training. And we will do mock interviews with you. Right now, we had about $30,000 in funding for classroom training and on-the-job training. We were able to dip into Jefferson County's funds because we had such a demand in 25 and spend some of their money too. What we typically spend our money on is electrical 1 and 2, LPN, RN. Obviously, we know there's a need in healthcare. We do a lot of apprenticeships for electrical. So when you check out the veterans page, there's good information on there. If you're talking to someone who's relocated about their MOS and how does that translate, that's a good piece that's on there. We have Access VR. And the really good stuff, again, you're hearing a lot about partnerships. So thank you to Cassie and her team for helping us apply for a grant. We do not have enough money, folks, for those pipelines that you continue to talk about that we need. So we applied for a grant up to $300,000 focused specifically on agriculture. And what we targeted was CDLA, hoof trimming, with an opportunity to do a work experience or some sort of apprenticeship, ag leadership series, dairy boot camp, skid steer training, and HVAC. It's written loosely enough. We can shift a little bit, but we know there's a need in the ag community. Okay. I'm done. Sorry. Do I hit the button again? Okay.
Any questions for Lisa?
We didn't ask a single one. I was very disappointed, but Tim is hurrying.
Yeah. Thank you, Lisa. We now move on to draft resolutions and motions.
Draft resolution number 1, authorizing budget adjustments within community services to reflect additional state aid received from the Office of Mental Health and contract changes with Thrive. The changes include a reduction of Thrive revenue and expenses totaling $39,743, along with increased revenues and expenditures for ARC, NERCL, and Lewis County Community Services programs to support personnel, benefits, equipment, supplies, training, travel, and other operational expenses.
Would someone like to move that? Barry? Do I have a second? Vinnie? Any discussion? All in favor? Anyone opposed? Draft resolution 1 is adopted and will be forwarded to the full board for action.
Draft resolution number 2, authorizing the Lewis County Sheriff Department to apply for up to $359,466 in New York State Division of Homeland Security and Emergency Services PSAP grant funding to support and enhance the county's 911 operations. The grant requires no local match, and if awarded, would authorize the county to accept the funding, execute necessary agreements, and appropriate the funds into designated 911 accounts.
Would someone like to move that? Herb? Second? Mike? Any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Draft resolution 2 is adopted and will be forwarded to the full board for action.
Draft resolution number 3, authorizing the Lewis County Sheriff Department to apply for up to $1,146,942 in New York State Division of Homeland Security and Emergency Services SICG grant funding to improve the interoperability and operability of the county's communication systems. The grant requires no local match, and if awarded, and would authorize the county to accept the funding, execute necessary agreements, and appropriate the funds in designated 911 accounts.
Would someone like to move that? Mike? Do I have a second? Vinnie? Any discussion? All in favor? Anyone opposed? Draft resolution 3 is adopted and will be forwarded to the full board for action.
Draft resolution number 4, authorizing an agreement between Lewis County and Vineski and Company to provide evolving technology services for the DSS accounting unit, including the Track with Jack system for a one-time cost not to exceed $20,000 from June 1st, 2026 through December 31st, 2027, with an ongoing annual maintenance cost of $4,000 beginning in 2028.
Would someone like to move that? Mike? Second, Herb? Any discussion?
I have a question. did that have to be RFP? Or was that RFP?
Yeah, professional services do not need to be
Okay.
RFP'd.
All right, thank you.
All in favor? Anyone oppose? Motion carries, adopted, and will be forwarded to the full board for action.
Draft Resolution Number 5, appointing Lonnie Snyder of Laval to the Lewis County Youth Bureau Advisory Board to serve a 2-year term from July 1st, 2026 through June 30th, 2028.
Someone like to move that? Barry, second. Vinnie? Any discussion? All in favor? Anyone oppose? Resolution 5 is adopted and will be forwarded to the full board for action.
Draft Resolution Number 6, appointing Megan Moroff of Copenhagen to the Lewis County Youth Bureau Advisory Board to serve a 2-year term from July 1st, 2026 through June 30th, 2028.
Someone like to move that? Herb? Second. Mike? Any discussion? All in favor? Anyone oppose? Resolution 6 is adopted and will be forwarded to the full board for action.
Draft Resolution Number 7, appointing Sarah Algalad of Laval Academy and Central School as a student representative to the Lewis County Youth Bureau Advisory Board. Her appointment will be effective June 3rd, 2026, and continue until her high school graduation or until she is no longer a full-time high school student.
Someone like to move that? Barry? Second. Vinnie? Any discussion? Resolution 7 is adopted and will be forwarded to the full board for action. I have no unfinished business. Is there any new business?
Something I think we should be looking at is our interview process. It's kind of disjointed, kind of rough, trying to get everybody coordinated or whatnot. I think sometime in the future, we should sit down and give it a full evaluation and look at what we're doing, how we're interviewing people. Coordination is almost impossible at times, and I think we're missing out on an opportunity to get a lot of qualified people in here.
Yeah, duly noted. Any other new business? There's no executive sessions. I take a motion to adjourn. Vinnie? Second. All in favor? Anyone oppose? Motion carried. We are adjourned.
I'm going to call the Lewis County Finance and Rules Committee to order. Cassandra, could you do a roll call, please?
Legislator Mosier,
Here.
Legislator Nellenbach,
Here.
Legislator Frost,
Here.
Legislator Osborne,
Here.
Legislator Lindecker,
Here.
and Legislator Dahlhoff.
Here.
I move to approve the committee minutes from April 28th, 2026. Do I have a second? Herb? Any discussion? All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Right, the motion is adopted. We do have two presentations today. The first presentation on today's agenda is going to be from Kalia Rhodes, the Lewis County Community Engagement Specialist. I'd ask her to come forward to the podium.
I feel a little weird following up Caitlin, telling you to get out your phone, but you're going to need this for this. Okay, so I'm just going to talk briefly about the new Lewis County Connect app that we have developed. Talk about some of its features, its benefits, and some goals that I have for it moving forward. All right, so if you don't already have the app, I would encourage you to use the QR code. Open up your camera app and download it. It'll ask you to select a new user and create a login for it. Once you are logged in, you can go through and access everything on the app. Anybody scan it or can I move forward? You good? Okay. All right. So just to go over a few background things about the app and why we decided to go with it. You're able to keep people informed and connected using an app that does not require social media. I know my generation uses a lot of Facebook and things like that, but they're younger than me that do not really use social media as much. So this gives them an app that will allow a notification sent directly to it instead of having to go and search for information using social media. So it does a push notification and can do an emergency alert. So we could use this for weather updates, road closures, public health notices. It's very popular for the highway department. We've used it quite a bit. We've done road closures and had a map showing the exact location of where the closure is. We can use it for an event calendar. So your public hearings, your board meetings, and community events can go directly on the app and be sent out. News and updates such as press releases, announcements, any project updates. We have worked with a team to make sure that it is compliant to use a device such as those that might not be able to see. They can have a device that'll read the information to them so they could still use the app. And it works really well with our website. So right now, if you look at the app, a lot of those, they call them applets. Each little section is an applet. It links to our website right now, but we can go through and build out those to be something that we created instead of it just going to our website. So our internal process, so I worked with Connor to get some of these things developed. I worked with the GoGov staff. They made the process really easy to get everything up and running, and they have an IT team. So if I ever have a question, they're very easy to reach out to. I used our branding guide for the app, which you'll see in there. It has all of our fonts, colors, our logo, different county photos are in there just to make sure that we're keeping everything consistent. And the GoGov staff actually helped create a full marketing toolkit. So we've got all kinds of ways to help advertise and promote the app. So some of the benefits, it's one centralized hub for all of the county information. You get the real-time notifications and alerts. So on the right there, that's alert that we sent out when the East Martinsburg Road had closed. So we just said, or had reopened, sorry. So we had just said that they were out cleaning up and we included a photo so people could see what was going on. It'll help residents find department-specific information and stay up to date on events and meetings and things that are going on. So just some reporting so far. So we haven't advertised it too much. I wanted to give this presentation before I really hit the ground running on it. So we have 451 Apple devices that have downloaded the app so far, 16 Android devices, and then 5 unique citizen accounts were created. So just some goals and next steps that I would like to see for the app. So like I said, we're going to really hit the ground running with advertising and telling people that it is available. We would really like to encourage people to set up a profile, so that unique citizen account. That way they could go in and pick what type of notifications they want to get. Like if they would rather see events, or if the road closures are more important to them, they can go in and personalize what type of notifications that they have. I hope to build out more of the applets. Like right now, the Board of Legislators page, I've made profiles for each of you, and I have included your district, and your photo is in there. So they can click on you and know exactly what you look like. We do also have an option to use a text message rather than just using the app. We have a local phone number that was assigned to us to use. So down the line, if we want to start to use that, we can. So it'll just send a text saying like there's a road closure or whatever coming up. So it'll go directly to their phone that way. And I hope to work with the towns and villages to give updates about different things that they have going on. It'd be a great tool just to use all over the county. See, short, sweet, to the point. Any questions?
Yeah, is there any way we can set it up so we don't have to take cookies?
I believe so.
I was going to say in the GIS, it requires cookies to look at it. I'm just, for
It
privacy.
shouldn't. Yeah, it shouldn't. I'm not sure if it does. If you set up the unique citizen profile, it might, but if you just download it, I don't think it requires any. And we did make sure, so it's in the company portal for all employees that are using a county issued device. You can download it from there, and it's been approved for the state devices as well. So now all of our employees have access to it. Okay, perfect. Thank you.
Thank you. So our second presentation today will be from the county manager, Timothy Hunt. It'll be Information Technology Department update.
Really a presentation, but a very quick summary of where we're at. The IT department had 5 employees. One of them left, and we've had a vacancy for about 3 or 4 months. Connor Balazzi, the director, has left. Wednesday was his last day here, so we're down to 3. 2/3 of the department is right here. They do a great job. And we've met with all of them, and we're gonna go a month and a half with just the 3 of them and see how that goes. And what we're doing is we're trying to reevaluate the actual job spec for the director of IT. Our concern is that it's going to be a very difficult position. There are several open in the county right now at considerably higher wages than what we're paying. So we want to look at that job spec carefully and see if we can make sure we can craft it in a way that we can fill it. So that's where we're at. Thank you. Any questions?
Thank you. So we will now move on to the draft resolutions and motions.
Draft resolution number 1, requesting amendments to New York State's host community benefit program for large-scale renewable energy projects, including increased annual fees, retroactive application, expanded community benefits, and incorporation of NYSERDA-supported funding into local renewable energy regulations.
I move that draft resolution number 1 be forwarded to the full board for action. Do I have a second? Jeff, any discussion?
Yeah, I have a couple things to say on that. So the host community benefit program, I mean, it was a good idea, but it's only 10 years of the project for the host community, and the host communities have to look at these solar farms for 25 years plus, right? So, and also with the rising electric cost, it doesn't really give you any benefit in your wallet. It's right now for like a project of 125 megawatts, it would only save the host community ratepayer $2.71 a month. Whereas if we went to the proposed $3,500 a megawatt and the same size megawatt solar farm of 125 for 20 years, that could be a savings of $37.95 a month, which is a tangible amount of money in the ratepayer's pocket. So, I think the goal here is to lower the cost of living for the ratepayers in these host communities.
Any other discussion? All in favor, say aye. Any opposed? The motion's been adopted.
Draft resolution number 2, authorizing the appropriation of $48,500 in community development block grant funds for the vacant and blighted property inventory project. The funds will support consulting services and grant administration activities with corresponding revenue lines established for grant reimbursement.
I move that draft resolution number 2 be forwarded to the full board for action. Do I have a second? Herb, any discussion? All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carried.
Draft resolution number 3, authorizing a 3-year renewal agreement between the County of Lewis and 9280-0366 Quebec, Inc., DBA Transit for the Transit Royale app used by the Lewis County Public Transportation System. The agreement runs from July 19th, 2026 through July 18th, 2029, a total cost not to exceed $27,500. Funded through Federal CARES 5311 transportation funding and provides users with real-time bus schedules, trip planning, and bus tracking services.
I move that draft resolution number 3 be forwarded to the full board for action. Do I have a second? Tom, any discussion? All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? The motion's adopted.
Draft resolution number 4, authorizing the Lewis County Planning and Community Development Department to submit an application to the New York State Environmental Facilities Corporation Green Resiliency Grant Program for up to $10 million to support flood mitigation efforts in the village of Lobble and surrounding areas. The proposed project would involve the construction of multiple stormwater retention structures to reduce future flooding impacts with the required 10% local match to be shared among participating public and private partners.
I move that draft resolution number 4 be forwarded to the full board for action. Do I have a second? Gary, any discussion? All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carried.
Draft resolution number 5, authorizing the Lewis County Planning and Community Development Department to apply for up to $6 million in New York State Department of State Community Resilience and Flood Risk Reduction funding to support watershed resiliency projects, including retention structures in the village and town of Lobble. The resolution also authorizes the county to participate in the required 10% local match in collaboration with project partners and to execute all necessary grant agreements if awarded.
I move that draft resolution number 5 be forwarded to the full board for action. Do I have a second? Tom, any discussion? All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? The motion is adopted.
Draft resolution number 6, authorizing the Lewis County Treasurer to close the capital project accounts associated with the completed Crowfoot Hill Road Bridge, New York project and make the necessary budgetary adjustments to reconcile remaining revenues and expenses. No additional cash appropriation is required.
I move that draft resolution number 6 be forwarded to the full board for action. Do I have a second? Jeff, any discussion? All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion's carried.
Draft resolution number 7, authorizing a renewal consulting agreement between Lewis County and Gilroy, Kiernan, and Gilroy for strategic health benefit planning, design, funding, and administration services. The agreement will run from June 1st, 2026 through March 31st, 2027 at a prorated cost not to exceed $129,167, with future annual renewals not to exceed $155,000.
Move that draft resolution number 7 be forwarded to the full board for action. Do I have a second? Herb, any discussion? All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carried. We have no unfinished business. Do we have any new business? Okay, with no new business, no need for an executive session. I will make a motion for an adjournment. Do I have a second? Jeff, any discussion? All in favor, say aye. Any opposed? We're adjourned.